lawmakers asked the government tough questions about how poorly it handled the April ferry disaster in the initial stage. Strong Korean won has the country's exporters on edge. Korea's April export prices dropped to the lowest level in over 6 years. And more than 200 people have been killed and hundreds more are still trapped underground after an explosion at a coal mine in western Turkey. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. In Seoul, I am Kang Chiri. Let's kick it off with the latest on the April ferry disaster. 5 more bodies were recovered today, but that means 23 people are still unaccounted for. And efforts to hold those in the government who delayed the initial rescue operations continue. Kwon So-ah reports.
There was a mistake with the numbers. The rescue operation is being carried out simultaneously by private and public authorities. So we are prone to making mistakes.
The way authorities have handled the Sewol-ho ferry disaster from the moment the boat started to experience problems has been the subject of harsh criticism. Nearly a month after that fateful day, state auditors have begun a special investigation into whether the government neglected its duties. The Board of Audit and Inspection has deployed a 50-person team to inspect the ministries and agencies responsible for the disaster response. These include the Ministries of Oceans and Fisheries, the Coast Guard, as well as shipping associations related to the sunken ferry. Auditors will focus on whether the government's response was appropriate and if rescue operations progressed strategically. The construction, management, and operational procedures of passenger ships will also be scrutinized. Further on, the audit team will look into how the government is supervising safety measures. Meanwhile, prosecutors are looking into putting more pressure on Yoo Dae-gyun, the first son of the practical owner of the Sewol-ho ferry, Yoo Byung-on. They put him on their Class A most wanted list on Wednesday, one day after raiding his house, which means he will be arrested on the spot once he is found. There are concerns he may attempt to flee the country if he already hasn't. Prosecutors have summoned his father, Yoo Byung-on, for questioning on Friday, and they say they expect him to appear. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And in Seoul's National Assembly, for the very first time since the ferry accident, lawmakers asked members of the government some tough questions about the initial crisis management. The grilling came from both sides of the political aisle. Choi Yoo-sun has more.
Lawmakers from both the ruling and opposition camps lobbed criticism at officials during a government report, saying their mismanagement of the accident led to its disastrous outcome. Jin Sun-mi of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy revealed details of a phone conversation between emergency operators and the Coast Guard in the early moments of the crisis. In it, the head of the emergency operator repeatedly asked the Coast Guard to bring the rescue to an area where high-level officials were standing by instead of an island closer to the accident site. The lawmakers said the conversation conflicted with what the Coast Guard had said about rescuing all the passengers being its top priority. Close to tears, Jin said formalities came before the safety of the 400-plus passengers inside the capsizing ship. In response to the accusations, the National Emergency Management Agency, in a written statement, said the request to send survivors elsewhere was made to speed up the medical treatment. Influential figures within the ruling Saenuri Party were also highly critical of the government. Accusing the government of being corrupt and lax, lawmaker Lee Jae-oh asked why it took officials an hour to first report the accident to the president. Lawmakers Heo Chung-won said Security Minister Kang Byung-gyu lacks crisis management abilities and should step down immediately. Seo added he would introduce a bill this week that calls for a probe into the causes of the ferry disaster, compensation for the victims and their families, punishment of those found responsible, and a reform plan to bolster national emergency response. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
And in other news, threats and insults are flying back and forth between the two Koreas. North Korea this time threatened to wipe out the South Korean government Tuesday, one day after a South Korean official said North Korea, quote-unquote, must disappear soon. Hwang Sung-hee with this report.
The recent spate of verbal attacks between the two Koreas is eroding hopes of an improvement in inter-Korean ties. The latest barb was North Korea's threat to wipe out the South Korean government. So what sparked such fury? It was South Korean Defense Ministry spokesperson Kim Min-sak's unusually blunt remark on Monday.
Can North Korea even be regarded as a country? Is there human rights? Is there freedom? It continues to make false claims that are historically retrograde. It's a country that cannot exist and should disappear soon.
North Korea's powerful National Defense Commission said Tuesday the comments mirrored South Korea's ambitions for reunification based on the South absorbing the North. It said the North Korean people are demanding an all-out attack on Seoul and vowed to wipe out President Park Geun-hye and her military officials entirely with merciless force. The two Koreas had agreed earlier this year to end all cross-border slandering. That promise was broken by Pyongyang about a month later, after the South Korean leader gave a reunification speech in Dresden, Germany, and laid out her vision for a reunified Korea. Since then, the North has been hurling sexist remarks at President Park, calling her names like an old prostitute. Seoul's Unification Ministry on Wednesday urged Pyongyang for an immediate end to such derogatory attacks. Experts say the intensifying war of words will lead to a prolonged confrontation between the two Koreas.
With no progress in resolving the North Korean nuclear issue and the two Koreas constantly exchanging negative words, inter-Korean relations will be on thin ice for the time being.
But they say the possibility of the verbal battle leading to a North Korean provocation, like a fourth nuclear test, remains slim for now. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
America's top negotiator on North Korean affairs says Washington maintains close contact with Beijing when dealing with North Korea issues. Glenn Davis was speaking at the Center for Strategic and International Policy in Washington on Tuesday, and he said North Korea is a regular on the table during talks with his Chinese counterparts. He said China is well prepared for a possible provocation by North Korea and has plans on its own to firmly deal with a variety of emergency scenarios on the Korean peninsula. An explosion at a coal mine in western Turkey has left hundreds dead and scores injured, while emergency crews continue attempts to rescue those still trapped underground. And with more on that, we now go to Paul E. standing by for us at the News Center. Paul, what do we know so far about the accident?
Well, the blast occurred early Tuesday local time at a privately owned mine in the town of Soma, some 250 kilometers south of Istanbul. Local officials believe the collapse came after a power distribution unit exploded during a shift change. The blast cut off the mine's electrical supplies while a fire spread through its tunnels. Turkey's energy minister says close to 800 people were inside the mine at the time of the accident. At least 205 people are confirmed dead, many due to carbon monoxide poisoning.
And Paul, what can you tell us about the ongoing rescue operations with hundreds of them still trapped underground?
Well, the country's disaster agency says they're attempting to dig out any survivors who may be trapped when the mine collapsed. But rescue workers are facing a difficult task as the mine was made up of long tunnels. They're also pumping oxygen into the mine, which sits approximately 2 kilometers below ground, in order to help those still trapped. It's shaping up to become the worst mining disaster in Turkey since 1992, when 263 miners lost their lives. Mining accidents are common in Turkey due to poor safety conditions. Jenny?
All right, thank you very much for that update. Paul E. there at the News Center, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday. About a week has passed since the Korean won started trading at the 1,021 level against the U.S. dollar. Now, this has Korean exporters on edge. Na Yeon-kyung has this report.
Korea's export price index for April fell to its lowest since January 2008. The Bank of Korea says the index stood at 88.3, down 2.5% from the previous month. That means Korean companies are making less profit when they're exporting the same amount of products due to the strengthening local currency. 340 companies recently surveyed by the Korea International Trade Association say they can make reasonable profits when the won trades against the greenback at 1,073 won on average. The break-even rate for them was at 1,045 won, and the fact that Korea's currency has been trading at 1,021 level for the past week is not helping their profit margins. Trade Minister Yoon Sang-jik convened a meeting on Wednesday and promised the government support in monitoring and managing the exchange rate. At the same time, he called on small and mid-sized companies to be on the lookout for exchange risks themselves. The minister also suggested taking this as an opportune time to reduce costs and tap into new markets, but some observers say even if that was possible, it would take a long time to achieve those goals. The Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency says trade conditions will be better in the latter half of the year, but not because of a weak Korean won, but because Korea's exports to China will likely improve. Na Yeon-kyung, ARIRANG News.
For the first time ever, Korea has put together a national balance sheet that gives a detailed breakdown of the country's economic structure that goes all the way down to average household wealth. It shows that the country's total asset volume is maturing at a rate that competes with other advanced countries. Shin Se-min reports.
Korea's national household wealth in terms of purchasing power is roughly 60% of that of the U.S. and 80% of Japan's. A report released by the Bank of Korea and Statistics Korea Wednesday shows Korea's national wealth or net asset as of 2012 stood at 10.6 quadrillion won or over 9.4 trillion U.S. dollars, 7.7 times that of the nation's gross domestic product. This is relatively high on the scale of national net asset to GDP ratio. France stands at 6.7, Japan at 6.4, and Canada at 3.5. When the nation's net asset is broken down to the individual level, it amounts to 207,000 U.S. dollars per person. The nation's wealth can be calculated by deducting debt from assets, and this is the first time that Korea has drawn up a figure for a balance sheet based on international standards. The latest figures prove that the nation's economic structure has matured to the level of developed countries. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Korea's labor market continued to show signs of improvement in April, adding almost 600,000 jobs. But it looks like for this month's figures, the effects of the FERRY disaster need to be factored in. Hwang Ji-hye tells us more.
The Korean economy added more than 580,000 jobs in April from a year earlier, bringing the number of employed in the nation to over 25 million. It marks 2 straight months of slowing job growth, but Statistics Korea says the figure still points to an improvement in the nation's labor market. The agency said greater than expected jobs were generated in the first 2 months of this year because of a rise in consumption prompted by the Lunar New Year holiday. The number of new jobs last month is also much more than the average number of jobs added each month last year, which was below 400,000. Some of the major job-creating sectors last month were related to the retail and health and social welfare industries. The jobless rate for those aged 15 to 29 stood at 10% in April, up 0.1 percentage points from March. The agency points out that the impact of last month's sunken ferry disaster was not reflected in the data and that it's expected to have a negative impact on the job growth this month. The government has cautioned that slowing consumer spending caused by the disaster could hurt the nation's economic recovery. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Samsung Electronics has officially apologized and promised to compensate for the workers who've got incurable diseases or died after working at its chip production facilities. Park Ji-won tells us more.
After years of denials, Samsung Electronics has offered an official apology to its former workers who are suffering from or have died from diseases allegedly brought on by their working environments. The tech giant's CEO Kwon Oh-hyun made the announcement on Wednesday, saying the company was sincerely sorry for having neglected the pain of the victims and their families and for not having settled the issue earlier. The company promised proper compensation and said it would abide by decisions made by an independent third-party panel of mediators. Samsung Electronics also vowed to check the safety of its semiconductor production facilities and to come up with concrete measures to prevent the recurrence of such incidents. The world's leading semiconductor manufacturer also vowed to withdraw itself from participation in all ongoing trials regarding cancelled compensation claims. The overall dispute came to light in 2007 when Hwang Yu-mi, a former employee at a Samsung semiconductor production plant, died of leukemia at the age of 23. Similar cases followed, with employees dying of rare blood-related diseases. Family members attribute their exposure to chemicals at factories as the cause. However, Samsung had denied the claim and resisted offering an apology. While Samsung continues to deny a direct correlation between the diseases and the working environment at its plants, Wednesday's apology represents a change in attitude. The apology came about a month after Shim Sang-jung, a Progressive Party lawmaker, called on Samsung and the government to apologize to the more than 200 workers who developed rare cancers or died after working at semiconductor plants. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
The Kospi rallied by more than 1% today, renewing its 2014 high. This thanks to strong foreign buying in techs and autos after a positive handover from Wall Street overnight. It's the first time that the index has breached the 2010 mark since December 30th. Analysts mostly expect the foreign buying to continue, with Attention Securities for One forecasting strong foreign buying in techs, autos, and utilities. The Korean won erased earlier gains to finish weaker on suspected dollar intervention. The Korean wave is not limited to the entertainment industry only. It's also helping Korean food make a splash on the global stage. An exhibition is currently running in Seoul to help local food firms find global buyers. Kana Kim was there.
Helped by the popularity of the Korean wave, exports of Korean food have been on the rise. And it's also local foods that are actively seeking to reach out globally. Hosted by the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, the annual Seoul Food Exhibition set ground for small and mid-sized Korean food companies to target international buyers.
Seoul Food Exhibition will be an opportunity for food all across the world to be introduced to different countries, including Korean foods. It will be a good opportunity for small companies to promote their brands outside the country, especially since it's being impacted by the Korean wave.
The event allowed visitors to experience and taste a wide range of foods firsthand.
It was impressive to see vinegar and soybean paste made in pottery. I hope traditional food can spread through the Korean wave.
This year, a variety of dry food products such as dehydrated seaweed, fruits, and powdered makgeolli or rice liquor won over visitors for its convenience and long shelf life. For example, these small dried pieces of kimchi can instantly create kimchi stew when dropped in boiling water. Visitors say it tastes just as good as fresh prepared stew and would easily appeal to foreigners. Kotra also invited a record number of companies from 43 different countries to promote their local foods in Korea.
It's for first time when we are here. We know that the Korean people eat healthy, and that's why we are here, because our products are 100% natural.
The company says the exhibition has laid a stepping stone for it to also establish a presence in the local market and introduce its crafted wines and organic jams to trend-sensitive Koreans.
With the aim to promote local food, small and mid-sized food companies in and out of Korea plan to target a larger customer base through the exhibition, which runs until Friday at Kintex, north of Seoul. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
The man that made hundreds of highlight reels and, of course, history along the way, Korean soccer player Park Ji-sung announced his retirement today. Kim Min-ji has more.
After 100 international matches and a professional career that dates back to 2000, Korea's most decorated footballer is hanging up his cleats. Park Ji-sung announced his retirement on Wednesday, citing chronic knee problems.
I've been considering retirement since February. I've concluded that my knee won't be able to last another season.
Throughout his career, the former national team captain has raised the reputation of Korean football thanks to his energy and strong work ethic. Park made his professional debut with Japan's Kyoto Purple Sanga in 2000. After grabbing the spotlight at the 2002 World Cup hosted by Korea and Japan, he joined PSV Eindhoven, where he played for almost 3 years, building up his professional career. He played for the Korean national team in the following 2 World Cups, scoring goals in each tournament. In 2005, Park became the first Korean to play in the English Premier League with Manchester United. He spent 7 seasons there, winning 4 Premier League titles as well as a UEFA League trophy. Park signed with the Queen's Park Rangers in 2012 and began the season as the team's captain. He returned to PSV last year on loan from the Rangers and appeared in 23 matches. When asked to assess his career, Park gave himself a 7 out of 10. He recalled the 2002 World Cup as the moment he wants most to return to. But for now, Park will be looking ahead to marriage. He is scheduled to wed former TV announcer Kim Min-ji on July 27th, and the two plan to live in Europe. Beyond marriage, Park said he will also think about how he can return the support he received from his fans and how to help Korean football. Although he's retiring, Park will be seen on the pitch again. He has 2 friendly matches scheduled for later this month and also plans to hold a charity match in July, which will be his last game. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Let's get an update now on the weather conditions with our Kim Bo-kyung standing by for us at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, it was another bright, sunny and hot day here in Seoul, but I hear it was a different story down south.
That's right, and some areas down south are still seeing light showers at this hour. Now, taking a look at the current conditions, the southern regions will gradually be free from a low pressure front from waters south of Jeju, so the drizzles will come to an end by later tonight. Just to note, the first ozone warning of the year was issued here in Seoul at 2 p.m. and that has now been lifted. As for tomorrow, less than 5 millimeters of precipitation is forecast for the central and northern regions, so it is recommended that you make sure to grab an umbrella for your morning commute. Other than that, you can expect sunny and warm conditions for tomorrow. Seoul tops out at 23 degrees while Gwangju and Busan hit 25. Moving on to other places, Jeju's morning low reaches 14 degrees before hitting 20 in the afternoon, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang peak at 18 and 16. That's all the updates I have for Korea, and here's a look at the international weather.
And I'm signing off here as well, but we'll see you back here at 10 p.m. Korea time.